everybody, and welcome to Mondoid Week 4. Another week of your Project Zomboid updates, talking about what the blog speaks about, and this week is more information on the metagame. Now, I highly suggest, if you want to read this whole thing, because it's a relatively long one, to go check it out, because they give some really good examples of what to expect with the metaverse, or the metagame rather. I said metaverse because of the word up top, and what exactly the implications of having this kind of system in the game are. It's another one of those really exciting things to read because it makes you really want the game out. But on top of it, you kind of have to tell yourself you want them to get it right. You don't want them to rush it out, and just trust them that it's going to be out when it's ready. Typical video game, blah blah blah. So what exactly do they talk about that's different than what they talked about in the podcast that they released 2 weeks ago, I believe it was 2 weeks ago? Well, they kind of talk almost on a consumer level, and by that I mean they're not talking programming language, they're not talking what to expect. They kind of actually give some really unique examples as to the kinds of stories that can happen throughout the game. What can happen when the game's playing itself, essentially, and what kind of situations the player can run into. So the first couple paragraphs are just talking about just the metagame itself, and they even mention the podcasts right here that they talk about, that they initially talk about the metagame on in their Monday updates 2 weeks ago. So what they end up doing is they talking about an example of what can happen, and that actually can happen in the game. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it right here. It's actually a very similar story to the one that they give is a very similar story to The Walking Dead, but this is something that came straight out of the game. This is not something that they pre-wrote. This is not something that they were they pulled out of The Walking Dead. This is actually something that can naturally evolve out of Project Zomboid with just the program that they wrote. And the example they give is Jack is a police officer. He's a leader of a bunch of survivors. He has his wife with him, he has 2 brothers and one of his friends. And there's somebody else I do believe there as well. They have, let's see, Jack, his wife Lisa. Others include 2 brothers, Bobby and Darren, and Sean. Bobby and Darren and Sean, so 3 brothers, and Jack's best friend is also a police officer. So the first day's uneventful, nothing really happens. Then the leader decides he's going to call a meeting with everybody and say, we need food. So he calls a meeting and tells everybody you need food. He leads them on an expedition to get some food. They end up going to Spiffos. They're all living on the farm, by the way. They all go to Spiffos, but Spiffos is overrun with a lot of zombies and lose one of the brothers. And I believe Bobby's the one that they lose. He ends up dying. All the while this is happening, so obviously the other 2 brothers are a little pissed off about it. As they return home, one of the brothers, Sean, is actually getting to know his wife, just kind of like in a friendly manner. And of course, what happens in the zombie apocalypse when you get to know the only woman in a group who is married, you fall in love with her and you want her for yourself. So with the whole fact that he loses his brother, he is also jealous of Jack and his wife. So he kind of plans this whole thing to kill Jack and go back and basically widow his wife and try and take over the group, which he ends up doing next time Jack calls a meeting and says, we need to go get more food. He goes out, he pulls a shotgun on Jack, kills Jack, and runs back with all this stuff happening. And this can all happen in the game without the player even there. Now, what they do talk about is that, they don't have dialogue written for everything. So it might just say something along the lines of, Sean insults Jack. Jack is now unhappy. And, it's just kind of one of those things. It's game mechanics right now over I don't want to say substance, but more like the fluff that surrounds those game mechanics. What's really exciting is that you can be any one of those characters. They will eventually have the ability where you are the one who can plot, you can insult, you can form plans and stuff. And one of the things that they actually talk about, and I commend them for talking about, is actually talking about how this in general make Let's Plays more interesting to watch. And the reason I say that's cool for them to talk about, because something I've always said about this game, and ever since I started playing it, is that something about it makes it exceptionally watchable. Even in the state it's in, the game is fun to watch. And I think it's because it has that whole zombie survival feel, where you don't know what's going to happen next. The person you're watching has their own story as to how they're going to survive, how they're going to get through the zombie apocalypse, how they're going to die. All of that is going to happen in front of you, and even though, you're not playing, when you play, it's totally different. What this allows is even more variety within the game world, even more variety within the Let's Play universe, even more variety when you watch. And another thing that I do talk about, which I like, is that you could take the back seat. You don't have to be the one that goes out on these zombie expeditions. You could eventually, with the gameplay mechanics they're planning to implement, basically play zombie fort management sim, where you are the leader of the group and you can send people out and you are keeping an eye out for plots against you and you're keeping an eye on the survivors' happiness and supplies and all these things, and you could never leave the house. You could sit in the fort or the safe house or wherever the hell you're living and just manage. And I think that could be really interesting because you are now playing from the perspective of the group leader who doesn't want to die because they are in control of everything and knows best what to do. Because you keep in mind too, with all these people, in these games, all these AI don't know what zombies are. Outside, of course, it's that typical zombie thing. Zombie apocalypse hits. Surprisingly, nobody knows what a zombie is. But you as a player knows what a zombie is, so you would have the best chance of leading a group into success. So how, you being doing a zombie sim management kind of role could be really exciting just because you know what to look for. So they're just talking about the metagame and all that, how all of this can happen off screen and on screen, and all these things that can happen with you. Characters have their own personality traits. They will consistently interact with each other, like each other, hate each other, plot against each other, kill each other, save each other. And it's just the examples, and I highly, highly suggest going to read it. Again, it's really, really hard to not suggest to go read this. I really think you should go and read it. Another thing they talk about is that once you beat the Bob and Kate storyline and you play survival mode, which is different sandbox, Bob and Kate's story will be in survival mode. You could go to Bob and Kate's house, and their own story can happen. What will happen? Will you walk up to the house and it'll be burned down because he left the oven on? Will you walk into the house and Bob and Kate are both zombies and they're going to try and kill you? Will you walk into the house and only find the house robber dead on the ground from a hammer swing to the head and have his gun or maybe nothing on him? Will you walk into the house and it's a widowed Bob who's by himself and he's freaking out? All these things can branch off, and it's just talking about all the things that can happen in this game without you even being there, and you could stumble across it. So I highly suggest going to read this blog. The story is really fun to read. The implications are limitless almost, and it's one of those things, as I said before, that just makes you really, really, really excited for the release of the game, or at least RC3 with some of these features implemented. And I severely look forward to diving back into this game and playing. It's going to be a good time. Thank you guys so much for swinging by for the Mondoid update. It's been a great blast reading this blog this week. It was way one of the best blogs out of the past 2 or 3 weeks. And as always, I will see you next time on my channel.